BlackRock broke the internet last night when they threw their support behind the Clarity Act and brought $30 trillion of Wall Street assets with them. However, today we're getting some news out of the U.S. Senate that despite the huge backing from Wall Street, the Clarity Act will likely not make the August deadline. Like, what a surprise. But you probably won't believe it. Russia is at the center of this story, and not how you probably think, but very interesting development here. So let me just get straight into it. If you weren't on Twitter last night, we saw this. Literally, the biggest names in finance are now backing the Clarity Act, which I'm sure a lot of people are feeling a little uncomfortable. But we got BlackRock, Charles Schwab, Fidelity, Goldman Sachs, and Grayscale. A combined $30 trillion of assets are now in favor of the Clarity Act. Huge, like, last minute push. We've been talking about this idea that from everything we're seeing, there seems to be the need for a Hail Mary for this to work out. Even though there's been a big push, big ground push from, of course, Senator Lummis. We've seen Scott Bessent back the Clarity Act. Of course, Donald Trump backed the Clarity Act. There's been a big push to get the Clarity Act through. But now that we are less than 10 days, under 2 weeks for the August recess, the August deadline, the floor is tight. There's a lot of considerations happening, and the Clarity Act is not at the top of this list. But what is at the top of the list is probably the most interesting rabbit hole of this story. So we got CoinDesk covering this, and of course I got Eleanor Terrett, one of my favorite journalists on this beat. But here's the headline from CoinDesk. I will read a little bit because there is some interesting takes here. Headline: U.S. Senate puts off Clarity Act for now, as it focuses limited bandwidth elsewhere. The majority leader, John Thune, is pursuing floor time for unrelated bills as the crypto industry waits for its policy efforts to get its chance to vote. Well, what are they pushing for? So the Clarity Act has been shelved as of now in favor of different bills, one on Russian sanctions and federal nominations, further setting aside the industry's central policy effort and reducing its available runway in a crowded Senate agenda. So here's the meat of it. Majority Leader John Thune started pursuing a package of nominees on Monday and expected to shift to a Russia sanctions bill tonight, at which point he's set to start its cloture process. The arcane Senate procedure to manage bills debates involve a number of steps and waiting periods before legislation typically gets to a final vote, and the chamber's procedures generally limit it to one disputed bill at the time. That means it's unlikely the body can move on the Clarity Act before the other matters get sorted or expire, which could take days. The Russia bill would impose sanctions on the country's leadership and tariffs for trading partners, and it's dedicated now to the recently deceased senator who supported it, Lindsey Graham. Bottom line, Clarity isn't likely to come up for voting before next week, which is what we heard. Obviously, there was a big push in saying that, last week they're going to have the debate over the Clarity Act. It's going to happen this week. Well, now it's, as we kind of covered yesterday, it's looking like maybe next week, but a lot of the conversation is like it's probably not going to happen before that August 8th deadline. Anyways, going further here, obviously August 8th deadline. The hotly debated market structure bill isn't yet ready for a vote, as the parties continue to try to seek a compromise on a contentious provision that stood in the way of a deal: the ban against senior government officials, including Trump, backing crypto projects. Now, obviously, there's still some hope here. Who knows? Again, as we kind of heard from Patrick Witt last week when we were covering this, he was mentioning that it looks like the Democrats will wait for the last minute to, cut some deals. Well, that's the best case scenario that we can have here. Though I have been seeing a lot of people say that, hey, if it doesn't pass before the August reset, they're still hopeful that it'll pass before the end of the year. But we all know that when they come back, it's the midterm. So probably not going to happen. But going a little further on this, there is a little more on this. Here is Eleanor Terrett kind of talking about the actual procedures. And this is where it's like, okay, we'll see. Anyways, hopes that the Senate Majority Leader Thune will hold a cloture vote on the Clarity Act this week are fading. From a procedural standpoint, he would need to file cloture on the motion to proceed today to set up a Thursday vote under Senate rules, but those involved in the process expect the Russia-Iran sanctions bill to take precedence. Attention is instead shifting to next week, with industry stakeholders telling me it is imperative for leadership to at least begin the cloture process before the August recess. Now, that's where we stand. We've been kind of talking about this, that it's just going to constantly keep kicked down the line. It does seem as if the process is to kind of run the clock out here. But before I get into what I think maybe part of this reasons is, which I think is a huge mistake here, are we surprised on this, Nico?
No, not at all. I mean, and there's still politics that are still being played. Like, for example, this was Senator Thune on Hannity last night. Check it out.
What do you believe you can get accomplished before the August recess, and then you come back in September? How imperative is it that these items get voted on?
Well, first off, I mean, we're going to do Russia sanctions, and that's a tribute to Lindsey Graham, who we all are going to, commemorate tomorrow. I think we'll get that done. I think we got to fund the government, and I think we're on a path to do that.
You don't think Chuck Schumer's shutting it down?
We'll see. I mean, I'm going to find out this week. But I think there's also there's a package of nominations. It's about 74 noms that the president's put forward that we're moving them in block. We'll do that. We will probably have a vote on the Clarity Act, which is the digital assets bill legislation that's in front of the Senate. We'll see if the Democrats give us the votes to get on that. There's also a possibility on NIL legislation. I had a couple of conversations over the weekend with people like Ted.
Yo, college football has more priority than the Clarity Act.
So it's conflicting information, right? So like he goes on Hannity last night. This is Senator Thune. He's the Senate Republican leader. Is that how you say it, Opti?
Majority leader.
Thank you. And he's basically saying, hey, look, like we have every intention to vote on this. It's not our fault. We're waiting for the Democrats to get on board. But, in memory of Lindsey Graham, we have to get the Russia sanctions, which is like, okay, like, I feel sorry for Senator Lindsey Graham. I wasn't a big fan of his, but like when someone passes away, it's sad. But like, it just seems like they're throwing everything and anything at this to like not let it happen. That's what I'm seeing. And Senator Thune is in this difficult position where obviously if the Trump administration is so hell-bent on passing this, it was part of their agenda. I think he has no choice but to say that on Hannity. If you look at the Polymarket odds, they're sitting at 35%. And as Opti, said earlier in the show, we need a Hail Mary, essentially, for this thing to get passed, right? And I've been on point with this since October. I'm saying they're going to delay this as much as humanly possible until the midterms. And that's exactly what happened. The Genius Act passed extremely quickly. And the reason that the Genius Act passed extremely quickly, in my opinion, is because essentially what it does is it perpetuates the US dollar globally. But the specifically to the Clarity Act, what I remember is Senator Lummis, who's really been driving this, and it's unfortunate she's not going to run for re-election, but I got to give her kudos, the Bitcoin senator, Senator Lummis. She said it on Legacy Media. She's like, in my entire political career, this has been the most difficult and controversial bill I've ever tried to pass. And, you had opinions from Jamie Dimon literally saying, curse words on Legacy Media, which they get fined for that. He didn't care. You had so much lobbying effort from Brian Armstrong and Coinbase. You had a lot of lobbying effort from pull that off screen, dude. You had so much lobbying effort from different entities and stuff like that. So it's just unfortunate at this point. that, you know, that isn't getting across the line. But, you know, if it's not meant to be, it's not meant to be. That's kind of my opinion on this. We weren't exactly totally happy about this. There was a lot of concessions made that, you know, the Bitcoin community didn't appreciate. But I think the two particular things that we were focused on was the protection for rights to self-custody and then the protection for open source developers. Those were the two things we really cared about. Unfortunately, it has to get like lumped into this massive bill for it to pass. And, you know, they took it right into the very end. And, you know, I don't know Senator Thune, but it seems like he's playing politics there when he goes on TV and kind of gives us a little bit of lip service, say like, listen, first Russia sanctioned. I mean, how many times have they sanctioned Russia and clearly it has not worked, right? They literally froze all these Russian assets. You know, Russia had to completely pivot its economy. It's so funny. Like the stores in Russia, when the sanctions started happening, like there was McDonald's, there was Nike, there was like all these, you know, stores. And then what they did was they just changed the name of the stores, but they kept the branding. So it's not called McDonald's anymore. It's called like, you know, Burger City, but it still has
Whack-Donald's.
But it still has like the arches and all this stuff. So it's like, how much more can you sanction Russia? And then my follow-up to that is like, how much does sanctioning Russia help the American people? Like, you know, the Clarity Act, we brought on so many people to talk about this specifically, public company CEOs, you know, political commentators, and they all have a general opinion on this, is that if you are a Bitcoin business owner in the United States, this would be positive for you. From a number go up perspective, this would be positive for you. That's the general consensus of the Clarity Act. And the US Senate is basically saying, listen, our top priority is we must sanction Russia once again. Look, it doesn't matter whether the Republicans or the Democrats hold, you know, the House and the Senate, they're all going to sanction Russia regardless. So it's like the priorities here are kind of misaligned, in my opinion. And I think they're taking advantage of, you know, the tragedy of Senator Lindsey Graham's death to once again slow this down. Like looking from an outside in, that's what I'm seeing, because like it's always another excuse. Like it's, oh my God, the Strait of Hormuz. It's like they're throwing everything at this thing to stop it. And I just think it's like, listen, like no one's better than their incentives. If we use the wording and the rhetoric of some of these politicians, Bitcoin is a non-sovereign alternative. That's how it's talked about. So what are these politicians incentivized to do? They're incentivized to continue the fiat system. The fiat system is very good for them. It's what allows the government to spend outside its means. We always hear the rhetoric from like, you know, politicians talking about like, we have to tax the rich, we have to tax the rich, we have to tax the rich. We hear that over and over and over and over again, like consistently. The US government collects more tax revenue year after year than it does before. So the government doesn't have a tax collection problem, it has a spending problem. And as long as the printer exists, they're going to continue to spend outside their means. And what are the ramifications of that? We've talked about it at length on this show. Every time the government prints money, it's a wealth redistribution mechanism. And it makes the poor poorer and it makes the rich richer. The poor don't have the means to save in assets. The rich have the means to save in assets. So when they print money, the price of those assets increase. And then the middle and lower classes that are living paycheck to paycheck, that don't have disposable income to invest, guess what? They're getting crushed. That's why the wealth inequality is growing as rapidly as it's growing. That's why you have this idea that, you know, a huge portion of the Democratic Party is somehow thinking socialism is a good idea. even though history has shown time and time again, from an economic perspective, socialism is not a good idea, right? So, you know, it's more of the same old, same old. I mean, we got close, but listen, my hope is in the future. I think as more and more people adopt Bitcoin out of necessity, I think the political winds are going to go with that. The mission of Simply Bitcoin is to move the cultural needle for worldwide Bitcoin adoption. The great Andrew Breitbart has a quote, which is, politics is downstream from culture. So if you want to change the political landscape, you have to change the culture. How do you change the culture? More people adopting Bitcoin, more Bitcoin podcasts, more Bitcoin content, more Bitcoin related movies, even if it's not directly related to Bitcoin, even if it just has the Bitcoin ethos underneath. When you have that adoption level, then you're going to see the political wind shift. And we've already seen this, ladies and gentlemen. This isn't some theoretical thing that I'm talking about. Imagine 5 years ago, before the current Trump administration, would you ever imagine a presidential candidate going to a Bitcoin conference and asking for votes? Would you ever have imagined that? That wasn't feasible 5 years ago. We were in the trenches. We were othered. We were saying Bitcoin is for criminals, all that stuff. So we've made a tremendous amount of progress, but clearly we're not there yet. Clearly the mission isn't over. Maybe, perhaps, right? It's a good thing that the Clarity Act didn't pass, because the next bill will be even more pro-Bitcoin. And that's something that we should take into consideration, you know? So that's my thoughts on all that. In my opinion, Opti, I think you agree with me. This is kind of like a little bait and switch.
I mean, if you were less cynical than me, I might, I might agree with you. But let me throw another wrinkle in here. All right, guys. The official reason here for why the Clarity Act might be delayed, obviously, there's still time left on the clock. Okay, so, you know, this conversation is, and I think the prevailing conversation is that the Clarity Act is just like, it's not going to happen. That, you know, hey, who knows? There's still some time here. Possibly, maybe a rabbit can be pulled out of the hat. But again, remember, the official headline is because of Russia's sanctions. Well, we haven't brought this up on the show yet. I'm sure you guys may have seen this. You may not have. But here's Moscow Times. This happened, I believe it was last Friday. Russia passes crypto laws to legalize trading under tight central bank oversight. So you can kind of make the case that Russia is working on their own Clarity Act. Though when you really read into what Russia is doing here, it's like, it wouldn't be that hard for us to actually beat this if the Clarity Act, as we've seen so far, passes. So let me just read you a little bit of how this is working out. Me and Nico were covering this morning, and we were like laughing at how this is being implemented. So just to give you guys some context here, Russia passed long-awaited law establishing a legal framework for crypto trading, allowing Russians to buy and sell major digital assets through central bank regulated intermediaries, big words there, while maintaining a ban on using crypto for domestic payments. So look, not that hard. Anyways, the legislation adopted after years of debate is part of the Kremlin's broader effort to formalize the crypto market while preserving tight state oversight. Authorities have increasingly turned to crypto to facilitate cross-border trades, as Western sanctions have restricted access to the global financial system. But they have also sought to limit unregulated domestic use. The new rules create a regulated market for crypto trading similar to Russia's security market, requiring exchanges, brokers, custodians, and other service providers to obtain a central bank license by July 1st, 2027. Under the legislation, crypto will remain prohibited as a means of payment inside Russia. Instead, individuals will be allowed to buy and sell crypto only through licensed market participants operating within infrastructure overseen by the central bank. Retail investors will have to pass a knowledge test before trading crypto. Investors who are not classified as qualified, about 98% of Russian investors, will be limited to purchasing no more than 300,000 rubles, or about $3,840 worth of crypto per year, through any single intermediary. So at the same time that the Senate is really focused on sanctioning Russia, and that is the top priority. Before the Clarity Act, we saw that literally days ago, the Russian central bank is like, hey, look, our citizens can't use Bitcoin, but we are legalizing the framework for us to be allowed to, you know, in their framing, skirt the sanctions that are trying to be imposed on us. And so comparing these two ideas here, what is the U.S. doing right now? We're so focused on sanctioning Russia while they are literally finding the escape valve right now. And like, hey, it's not a Clarity Act. This is not good for the people of Russia. But now they are legalizing the use of Bitcoin, and I'm guessing, you know, ETH and a couple of other shit coins. But as you can see, like, what the Senate is focused on right now is literally what Nico and I have been saying on the show for a long time. It's like it's obsolete already. It's DOA on arrival because they're not going to be stopping, you know, sanctions or whatever because they're not necessarily even working on using the dollar as much. They're like, hey, we're actually going to be using something else.
Russia has already pivoted its economy, right? Like, this wasn't the shock that happened when the Ukraine-Russia conflict started. Like, Russia has already pivoted its economy in its entirety so that it's immune to sanctions or becomes more resilient to sanctions already. So this is just like talk. That's how I see this, right? Like and also, like, if you want to go like down the talk of sanctions, right? I'm not going to talk about the you know, because the whole idea of sanctions is to, you know, essentially penalize these regimes that are against the United States of America. I'm not going to get into that. It's a wrong show. But what doesn't get talked about enough is the collateral damage of sanctions. So I'll give you a couple examples. If you're in Cuba, you get affected by U.S. sanctions if you're the average everyday Cuban. If you have nothing to do with the Cuban government or Cuban politics, you get affected by sanctions. You are essentially othered. You cannot open a U.S. bank account because you're a Cuban. Or if you happen to be born in Iran, you cannot open a U.S. bank account because you happen to be born in Iran and you have nothing to do with the government. And my question to you is, like, is that just? Is that okay? Are you not entitled to use money because of the place you happen to be born in? I don't think that's morally correct. And this is why Bitcoin exists. And this is why I believe there is a big motivation, and maybe it was symbolic when he was talking about Russian sanctions. I think there's a big motivation in the political class where they know that a big portion of their voters are pro Bitcoin, crypto, whatever. But ultimately they realize, like, wait a second, if there is more Bitcoin adoption and people are taking into self-custody and they are transacting peer-to-peer, we have less control over them. Maybe that could be a motivation. I'm just throwing it out there. Like, I remember the Woodrow Wilson quotes when he was talking about the establishment of the Federal Reserve. And he was just making these comments. I'm doing this out of memory, but he was making these comments where it's basically something, I'm paraphrasing here, but something along the lines of, like, you know, not all people should have the ability to, you know, to control the government, right? At least the Federal Reserve. And then, like, there's an indication of that. Like, I don't know if you guys saw the Supreme Court case where essentially Trump sued, and basically the Supreme Court gave him the win where he can fire certain bureaucratic officials that work in the government. But when it came to the Federal Reserve, this specific Federal Reserve governor that, according to Trump, she apparently committed a crime, the United States president can't fire that Federal Reserve governor. So then who has oversight over the Federal Reserve? And I saw you guys in the comments the last time. All you guys were like, Nico, it's Congress. It's Congress. Okay, let me ask you guys something. If Congress can spend as much money as humanly possible, and that is enabled by the Federal Reserve in the first place, do you ever think Congress will be incentivized to go against the Federal Reserve? So is there really democratic oversight over one of the most powerful, I would say the most powerful institution in the United States? And I would say this election cycle clearly showed no. There is no oversight. You can, if you're not happy with what's going on in the Fed, you cannot vote them out. You can vote out the president, you can vote out congressmen and congresswomen, you can vote out senators. But if you're not happy with the Fed, there is zero democratic accountability to that. That is crazy. And they control the money. And they print the money. So, is this really a representative democracy? Is this really a republic? And then it reminds me of, I'm like connecting the pieces on air here. It reminds me of the post that I tweeted on July 4th. And it's a picture of George Washington and his laser eyes coming out of his eyeballs. And back then, they had bad experiences with paper money, but this is a direct quote from George Washington. Quote, paper money has had the effect in your state that it will ever have, to ruin commerce, oppress the honest, and open the door to every species of fraud and injustice. This was George Washington, the founder of the United States, talking about fiat currencies, paper money. They made it very clear. There's not a lot to interpret there. Oppress the honest, this is George Washington, and open the door to every species of fraud and injustice. What are we seeing in the United States today? And I would say the world when it comes to fraud and injustice. Do we really have an equal justice system? No. Is there fraud? I mean, do you remember the 21-year-old kid that, discovered the daycares? No mainstream media outlet covered that. It took a 21-year-old YouTuber to go viral on X to discover that. So, oppress the honest falls into this. You play by the rules, pay your mortgage, pay your grocery bills, pay your taxes, and everything around you keeps getting more expensive. And you have no idea why. And then the politicians are playing into this because they're treating inflation like it's part of Mother Nature. What Bitcoin fundamentally proves, ladies and gentlemen, is that money can exist without inflation. And money can exist, rules without rulers. And not only can it exist in that way, it's actually better money in that way. So I think, this is why I always go back to the culture, over the next 10 to 20 years, it is our duty as Bitcoiners to spread that message. Because while everybody gets very, very focused on politics, they don't realize that there isn't a political solution to this in the traditional sense. The strongest vote that you can make as an individual, doesn't matter where you are from, is buying Bitcoin, earning Bitcoin, mining Bitcoin, and putting that Bitcoin into self-custody. That is what will fundamentally change the system from the bottom up. I'm not saying fiat elections are not important. You do want pro-Bitcoin politicians. You don't want anti-Bitcoin politicians, because we'll find ourselves in an Operation Choke Point 3.0 type of situation. So I'm not saying fiat elections are not important. They are important. But remember, the most important vote you can make is with your wallet. It's where are you storing your energy, your time, and your work? What are you storing it in? Are you storing it in dollars, or are you storing it in Bitcoin? That's how we fundamentally move the cultural needle from the bottom up. This is a grassroots peaceful revolution. That's how we ultimately change things. And remember, the United States of America was founded on no taxation without representation. That was the whole ordeal. By the way, that tax was 3%. I'm not going to get into the income tax debate. You're getting taxed way more via inflation today than the 3% that the United States was born of. They were so pissed off about that 3% tax that they started a revolution. And their whole tagline was taxation without representation. If you can't elect out any Federal Reserve governor, if you don't have a democratic check on the Federal Reserve, what is that but taxation without representation? You tell me. I'm curious. Doesn't make sense. So anyways, back to what I always say, Bitcoin or slavery, which direction do you want to take? I know what direction I want to take. It's obvious to me. My rant is over. Haven't been on the show for a while. Feels good.
It's nice having someone here with me.
Bro, I've been so busy dealing with Simply things. And just happy to be on air, man. Feels good. Anyways, we're going to have a fantastic show. Tons to cover today, ladies and gentlemen. You guys are going to want to stay tuned. We covered the Clarity Act already, but we're also going to be covering BIP 110. Michael Saylor has a lot of opinions on BIP 110. We're also going to show you the consensus.health website. It kind of shows you where predominant members of the community sit on the BIP 110 argument. Very interesting to see. And also, for the first time, and I'm going to tell you why this applies to Bitcoin, U.S. and Customs Border Patrol accuses American of allegedly wiping his phone using a duress password during border search. It's very interesting. So we're going to get into the details of that and more. You guys are going to want to stay tuned. If you guys like today's show, make sure to smash that like button, share it with your friends, and we're going to be right back just after this quick break.
Here's the part that nobody says out loud. Buying Bitcoin on an exchange and leaving it there isn't buying Bitcoin. It's buying an IOU. And the last decade has been a masterclass in what happens when those exchanges don't deliver on their promises.
Bitcoin Well is a self-custody Bitcoin platform. That means that when you buy Bitcoin, it goes straight to your self-custody Bitcoin wallet. You actually own it from the very first transaction. They're available both in the United States and Canada. Pricing is transparent, straightforward, and no nonsense. And if you're buying a larger amount of Bitcoin, Bitcoin Well Infinite gives you concierge-level support through a dedicated executive Bitcoin advisor, premium help for when it actually matters.
You can also stack a little extra through the referral and wishing well rewards. A nice bonus on top of the owning your own Bitcoin thing. So go to bitcoinwell.com/simply and sign up for the Bitcoin Well portal today and buy Bitcoin you actually own. Paper burns, paper floods, paper fades. If your seed phrase is written on paper, it's not really backed up. It's waiting to disappear. Stampseed's DIY kit lets you hammer your seed words directly into commercial grade titanium. Fireproof, crush-proof, waterproof, and permanent. Once your words are in the metal, they aren't going anywhere. Use code SIMPLY at stampseed.com for 15% off anything in the store. That's stampseed.com, code SIMPLY.
All right, everybody, we are back. I saw Opti trolling me. Yes, Marco Rubio 2028. It would be fantastic.
Well, to be clear, they were saying like, why are we talking about Cuba? And I was like, Nico's laying the foundation to show for Marco Rubio.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little bit biased, right? I'm originally from Venezuela. My parents
Yeah, dude,
from
we
Venezuela.
know. We've heard it.
So it would be very positive for Marco Rubio to get elected as president. It'd be great. Cuba libre, Venezuela libre. It's happening.
No. Who cares about them?
At the time of recording, the Bitcoin price is 63,606. Get out. Block height 960,000. Sorry, got a message. Market cap 1.28 trillion. Bitcoin versus gold market cap 4.23%. Decline from all-time high, negative 49.5%. All right. Let me show this. I want to show you guys. So this is a very cool website. I'm going to put it in the chat. I'm going to put it on Rumble and YouTube so you guys can check it out. It's called Consensus Health. It's going a little crazy on me. There you go, YouTube. There you go, Rumble. So essentially what it does is this really cool. I don't know what's going on here. There we go. Let's push this aside. It shows you where every member of the community stands on the BIP 110 debate.
Well, I don't think it's everyone. I
I
think
mean,
you have to like opt in on it, right?
So like it's I would say not everyone, but very notable people in the community and where they stand on the BIP 110 debate, right? So of course, you know, you got Tone Vase here, you got Giacomo, you got Pete Ruzzo, you got Michael Saylor, you got Dylan LeClaire, you got Andreas Antonopoulos, you got Odell, you got Walker, right? And, you know, you got MVK, you got Mandrick, right? So you got Danny Knowles, you got BitcoinNews.com. And then you got people that are in the middle. Simply, the reason that Simply's in the middle is because, again, we don't have a centralized editorial voice. So every single member of our team has completely different opinions on this. You know where Rustin stands. Other people in the
where
team,
Opti stands.
other people in the team feel differently. I haven't told you guys because you guys are just going to beat me up. You don't need to know what I run on my node. That's my problem. You can run whatever you want on your node. That's your problem.
Dude, that's literally why they come here. They want to know, though. You're a talking head.
I'm not going to say it because then all of a sudden that was Simply Bitcoin thing is going to get pushed to one side. So we're going to take the middle of the road officially as a company. I have my own personal thoughts. And then on the other side,
big Bitcoin will win.
You got Matt Crater. And I also want to allow, this is like what also like Marty Bentz on the core side. But like, I also want to allow, I think it's extremely important on the Simply Bitcoin platform to allow debate, right? Like I want to hear,
I agree.
I want to hear the Knot side, and I want to hear the Knots BIP 110 side, and I want to hear the Bitcoin Core side. Like we've had, you know, the Ocean guys come on the show, give their opinion. We've had Tone Vase come on the show, give his opinion. Like it's super important that there's a platform where Bitcoiners can debate this, right? So it just doesn't become this hive mind mentality of like, you know, we all have to go in this direction. I think that's really bad. So I think debate is really healthy for the overall Bitcoin community. That's why I haven't publicly chosen a side.
Wait. C-Suite on Rumble goes, "Lol, tell us, Nico, we'll rip you apart either way." So true.
So I was gonna say it and just cough, but no. Anyhow, so Michael Saylor feels very strongly about this. He starts off by saying, "Bitcoin has won. Now I must survive victory. Its gravest threat is not an enemy at the gates, but corruption from within. Factions that invent pretexts, rewrite the rules, and seize economic rights until freedom becomes permission and law becomes loot." He then goes on to say, Bitcoin's consensus rules are its constitution. They define property, scarcity, settlement, and power. To rewrite them for the convenience of any faction is to attack the economic rights of every participant today and every generation to come. Bitcoin can grow 100-fold and become the foundation of global capital. A corrupt rule adopted today could rob future generations of markets not yet built, technologies not yet imagined, and economic freedom not yet won. Statism, that's strong, wears many uniforms, but its method never changes. Manufacture a crisis, suspend neutral rules, seize economic rights, and call theft justice. Civilizations rot from within when factions capture the law. Bitcoin will rot the same way if factions capture consensus. Some proposals like BIP 110 censor valid fee-paying transactions. Others add covenant machinery. Others demand larger blocks. Different instruments, same constitutional offense. A faction rewrites Bitcoin's rules and imposes its agenda, costs and risks on everyone. Censorship forbids miners to serve willing buyers. Larger blocks dilutes block space scarcity, and raise bandwidth and validation costs. Covenants permanently complicate consensus and create new attack surfaces. Less freedom, less scarcity, more risk. Miners put capital at risk to secure Bitcoin. Their subsidy halves every 210,000 blocks. So fees must carry more of the security burden. Cripple the free market, and you starve Bitcoin's defenders when the network will need them most. This is not protection. It is disarmament. So he just keeps going. And I mean, I got to say, like, makes a pretty good case. I think Saylor is one of the best salesmen. He adds up and says, he continues and says, to reject Bitcoin's integration with banks and corporations, custodians and exchanges, equity and credit markets, governments and currencies is to deny its benefits to 99% of the world and doom it to 1% of its potential. So let's talk about the BIP 110.
Wait, there's one more. There's one more. Let me find this. This one's
so while you pull it up, let's talk about the BIP 110 chain split. The potential BIP 110 chain split is scheduled to begin unfolding in stages starting August 8th through the 9th, 2026, with full activation expected by early 2026. Because this is an aggressive user activated soft fork mechanism, the fork doesn't happen all at once. Instead, it follows a strict sequence of on-chain block heights. Timeline of the fork. August 8th through the 10th, which is just around the block, no pun intended, mandatory signaling begins. Nodes enforcing BIP 110 will actively begin rejecting any block from miners that does not signal support for the upgrade. If the majority of the mining network continues to oppose the upgrade, this is the exact moment the blockchain will split into two separate paths. Late August 2026, lock-in phase. The mandatory signaling rules dictate that the upgrade will officially lock in at this block height. September 1st, 2026. Full enforcement and activation. This is when the actual data restrictions rules go live. From this point, BIP 110 nodes will reject any transaction containing heavy arbitrary data like ordinals or oversized scripts. Okay. So from my understanding, it was the Taproot upgrade that enabled ordinals. Is that right, Opti?
yeah.
Okay. So the reason I bring that up is I think that's
read this tweet.
Did you pull it up?
Yeah. Check the stream.
So another tweet by Saylor. Bitcoin's core design is set in stone. Protocols changes should be rare, conservative, and driven by necessity, not ambition. Don't fix what isn't broken. Okay, so that's a great...
Wait. Now read this one.
BIP 110 is the latest outbreak of the... I just heard... I don't agree with that one. I don't agree with that one because Saylor was saying that
I know, but dude, he got everyone pissed off on that.
The other one, the other ones, I understand and I empathize with, but that one, it's like he wasn't necessarily early to the party either. He was like disagreeing with Bitcoin, so maybe that was a little bit of a troll. But anyways, that's besides the point. Thank you, Satwise Jex. It's a combination of Taproot and Segway. Okay, so my point with Taproot is that when it was implemented, everyone was super hyped about it. I remember it like it was yesterday. And Taproot had unintended consequences. I don't think anyone was talking about ordinals before Taproot. I don't think that was even a thing.
No.
So like it enabled something that we didn't know could exist because you changed, to use Michael Saylor's term and terminology here, the Constitution. So I think there are unintended consequences when you change Bitcoin. And those unintended consequences, a lot of the time, you cannot foresee those. You can only foresee them once it's changed. Now, I empathize with the BIP 110 argument. I totally get it. I understand. But my thoughts on it would be, we don't have consensus here. The vast majority, and I showed you guys, this is why I pulled up the website. I'll pull it up again for you guys to see. And again, this is just kind of a representation of the Bitcoin influencers. The vast majority of people are not supporting this, including Andreas, including Adam Back, including Tone Bays, including Stefan Livera, including Giacomo, including Dylan LeClaire, Odell. You know, there's, of course, Nick Szabo that is supporting it. There's Simon Dixon, right? So there's notable voices on both sides. Of course, Luke Dash Jr. is on the pro BIP 110 side. But if there isn't a consensus, then there is going to be a chain split. And we've seen what happens with those in the past, right? So I don't know how this is going to play out. I understand the arguments from both sides. Just with that deadline, Opti, like with those dates, I don't see this coming to a resolution.
No. I mean, look, I've been trolling a lot lately. You guys know. I think the big Bitcoin meme is just like the funniest thing going on right now. It brought back memes for me, and I've been leaning into big Bitcoin. I think it's funny, but in the context, like even if I'm looking at that Consensus Health website, like to me that is kind of like irrelevant. Because it's like influencers, it doesn't really matter what the influencers think per se. But hold on. My point is, like, I get, you know, that's the prevailing conversation. I think the most important aspect is the actual BIP 110 signaling right now. And I just looked it up on, you know, Wicked's website here, and it's like 0.5%. So like the economic actors, the miners that are, you know, and I know it can change, and I hear that's what the really like prevailing thought is on the BIP 110, that like as the deadline comes closer, there'll be more people mining, signaling for it. But where it stands right now, it's just like I don't think it's going to activate. Now I know I've been hearing a lot of people basically saying like I'm willing to go down with the ship type kind of mentality, and you know, like kudos to you if that's the case that you're in. From what I'm also hearing, like, you know, it's seemingly through the grapevine, it is looking like it's going to end in like a hard fork here. And I'm kind of like, I wasn't here for the fork wars. So airdrops coming. I'm kind of getting excited to participate in an airdrop here. So anyway, Nico, you can try to counter the influencer perspective here.
No, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of, I think you hit the nail on the head, bro. I don't really have anything to, you know,
Dude, I'm always right. Thank you, Nico. He just admitted it. I'm always right.
I don't really have any. I don't really have like a counter argument to what Opti is saying, because ultimately, like, you know, are the miners, you know, behind this?
I think that's the biggest question. That's like that should be the
are the miners behind this, and are the nodes behind this?
Well, I don't think it, like, node count doesn't necessarily mean much. It's like the miners don't seem to be behind this. So part of this whole conversation, and you guys have been pushing and you know, very active on this. And, you know, for the longest time on this, I was like, I don't really think it's that big of a concern. And then after a while, as like the heat started to, you know, raise, it's when I actually was looking into it more and trying to understand both sides of the argument. And just from like that fact in itself, that the miners really, you know, they're not really pushing for this. That just makes it seem like they themselves don't really think like it's this existential crisis.
I mean, like from the incentive perspective, what Michael Saylor was laying out, right? It just seems like there's just less money on the table for the miners.
Yeah, sure.
So anyhow,
and full disclosure, like we're not for spam, you know, like we don't do ordinals, we don't do runes or however.
Look,
we are monetary maxis, but
I completely understand the argument. That's why I'm empathetic to both sides. I just don't see consensus, and if there's no consensus, then there's going to be a split. And then as Opti said, it's like, okay, we get forked coins.
Hey, dude, I'm so down for an airdrop.
Right?
Let's go.
So, you know, let's see.
Wait, we need a poly market odds on, like, what's the price going to be on BIP 110 coin?
I will. I will say that damn, August is going to be a spicy month.
I mean, it's in like what, 2 weeks?
Yeah,
Or less than
August is
about 2 weeks.
August is going to be spicy, bro. It's going to be spicy. That's what I got to say.
I mean, we got the Unclarity Act, BIP 110 activation.
We're going to be right back.
It's going to be a good one.
I want to give a shout out to our partner, Ledin. Here's something most Bitcoin holders never figure out until it's too late. You're sitting on wealth you can't touch without selling. Ledin fixes that. Bitcoin-backed loans. You keep your stack, you get cash. And they just introduced their lowest rates ever. No complexity, no fine print. The larger the loan, the lower the rate. These new rates apply to all new loans, refinances, and renewals. You'll see all the rates up front before you apply. The new, lower rates come with Ledin's gold standard protection. Your Bitcoin remains custodied and is never lent out for interest. Perfect 8-year track record of keeping clients' assets safe. Auto top-ups, LTV alerts, and partial repayments to keep you in control. Repay whenever you want with zero penalties or monthly payments. Ledin's perfect $10 billion track record through every market cycle in the last 8 years speaks for itself. Don't choose between a great rate and the safety of your Bitcoin. Get both at Ledin. If you ever thought, what happens to my Bitcoin if something happens to me? Or what happens if I lose my phone? You're not alone. For a lot of people, the biggest barrier to self-custody isn't buying Bitcoin. It's the fear of making a mistake. And that's why I like BitKey and I recommend it to my friends and family. BitKey is a Bitcoin wallet built for real life. Not just for day one, but for everything that happens in between. Lost devices, upgrades, accidents, and long-term ownership. There's no seed phrase to write down and worry about losing. And no single point of failure that can lock you out of your Bitcoin forever. What really stands out about BitKey is the peace of mind. Recovery is built in. Inheritance is built in. It's a complete self-custody system built by the team behind Square and Cash App, designed to make holding your own Bitcoin simpler and safer. Take self-custody of your Bitcoin today using BitKey. Go to bitkey.world and use promo code SIMPLY for 10% off your new BitKey. That's bitkey.world, promo code SIMPLY. I want to give a shout out to our partner, HIVE Digital Technologies. Fueled by clean energy across 3 continents, HIVE runs dual engines, Bitcoin mining and AI compute. Their AI platform is ranked #1 in the world for network performance, and it's doing something bigger than compute. It's accelerating human discovery, the science, the breakthroughs, pushing humanity further and faster. Listed on the NASDAQ with the ticker HIVE. Catch the latest buzz at HIVE Digital Tech on X or HIVEdigitaltech.com.
You secured your Bitcoin, but did you secure your devices too? They're still broadcasting your location and digital footprint. GPS, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, cell, 5G, EMF, all of it is leaking. Escape Zone fixes that. Their Faraday bags block every signal your device emits, so you decide when you're detectable, not the grid. Built for Bitcoiners who know sovereignty isn't just your wallet. It's your phone, your hardware wallet, your keys, and your entire digital life. Go to escapezone.com/simply and use code SIMPLY for 10% off. That's escapezone.com/simply, code SIMPLY.
All right, everybody, we are back. Interesting development, ladies and gentlemen. I do want to pull this up because it kind of changes things.
Wait, I want to pull up something. Ron, Nico is right. Opti is always right.
Ron's not a Nico fan, but I saw some Nico fans in the chat today, so that
we still love you, bro. We still love you.
All right, so I'll tell you why this relates to Bitcoin. LOP posted, in the first case of its kind, the U.S. Department of Justice, aka the DOJ, is prosecuting an American for allegedly providing U.S. border authorities with the duress passcode that wiped the contents of his graphene phone when they seized it. So you're like, Nico, what the F does this have to do with Bitcoin? There are some hardware wallet devices that have duress pins. And when you punch in those duress pins, what they do is they either open an alternative wallet or they flash the device. They just brick it. So if this can apply to a phone, and they're setting a precedent here, you can see how this is applied to how this could potentially be applied to a Bitcoin wallet. Depending on the outcome of this case, it's going to set a very dangerous precedent depending on where it goes. Let's get some community members in here. So we have Zach Herbert. Zach Herbert is the co-founder and CEO of Foundation. Foundation Devices makes Bitcoin hardware wallets. And he says, can we finally talk about how outrageously unconstitutional it is to lose our fundamental rights as a U.S. citizen at the border? People are saying, Cigar Pepe says, duress passcode doing exactly what it was designed to do. Now it's a federal case. Culture. Someone said, bro is smart. Someone said, if he is an American, doesn't he have U.S. constitutional rights, even if he is technically not on American soil? So this is kind of where it gets tricky, right? And the reason it gets tricky is if you are in the U.S. and you do this, you're fine. The problem is when you're crossing the border, when you're going from outside U.S. territory into U.S. territory. That's where it gets tricky. Also, another thing that's tricky as well is currently as the law stands, you have to report any assets that you have. I think it applies to specifically fiat currencies. If you have more than $10,000 worth of fiat currencies when you cross a border, you have to report that. Can you apply the same thing to Bitcoin? Right? Because it's not like you're passing the border with, let's say you had $15,000 of Bitcoin in your hardware wallet and you pass the border. It's not like you're physically passing the border with $15,000 of Bitcoin. You're passing the border with the keys to access that Bitcoin. So does the same kind of logic apply, right? And now let's get into the nitty-gritty of it. Here's the TechCrunch article. U.S. accuses American, that's the key word here, right? Because this is an American citizen. So he's supposed to be protected by the U.S. Constitution, by the Bill of Rights, etc. U.S. accuses American of allegedly wiping his phone using a duress password during border search. The DOJ is prosecuting an American for allegedly providing U.S. border authorities with a passcode that wiped the contents of his phone. According to an indictment and media reports, this is thought to be the first known case in the United States where federal prosecutors have charged someone for the alleged destruction of data using a duress password built into a phone software. According to The Guardian, which covered the story earlier this week, following the court's first hearing on Monday, Atlanta resident Samuel Tunick is fighting the charges. Tunick's attorneys said that it was unlawful for U.S. Customs and Border Protection to seize his phone as he arrived back in the U.S. last year, that any evidence, including the alleged wiping of his phone, should be thrown out. The case centers on a feature included in Graphene, a custom Android operating device that runs in place of the software on most modern Google Pixel devices. Tunick's attorneys conferred Graphene was running on his phone. The software feature allows the device owner to set a passcode that deliberately wipes the contents of that device if entered instead of the user's unlocked passcode. By the way, you have the same thing on an iPhone. There's a setting where if you get the PIN wrong 10 times in a row, it wipes your device. So anyways, Tunick's attorneys filed a motion to suppress the evidence, claiming that the detention and the seizure were unlawful. The motion said U.S. border authorities took Tunick into a secondary inspection at Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson Airport as he returned from overseas on January 24, 2025, but that he was repeatedly denied access to an attorney and was not informed of his legal rights. Excuse me. Tunick's attorneys accused the government of demanding access to his phone under the pretext of searching for
CSAM.
Yes, but without providing evidence to justify suspicion. His motion to suppress argued that the government was instead investigating him over his association with a long-running environmental movement called Defund the Atlanta Forest, which opposes the development of a sprawling training campus for law enforcement in Atlanta dubbed Cop City. The motion said that the border agents claimed they did not need a warrant to search Tunik's phone because he had not yet crossed the U.S. border. This is true. The U.S. government has long claimed it can search and seize people's devices without a search warrant or court order until they are permitted entry to the United States. When Tunik provided his passcode and the authorities entered it, the quote, the screen went blank and flashed several times and the phone appeared to restart. The authorities seized his phone anyway before telling him that he was free to go and could enter the United States. Prosecutors charged Tunik under a federal statute that makes it unlawful to knowingly destroy or damage property to prevent authorities from seizing it. Tunik has pleaded not guilty. Matthew Dodge, an assistant federal public defender on Tunik's legal team, told TechCrunch that it was incredibly rare to see the federal statute used in an indictment. Security experts also said they had not seen charges brought in this way before. This is why it's so important. The precedent that this case sets is going to have direct implications for anyone who is crossing the border with a Bitcoin hardware wallet. This is why we're covering it. This is why a lot posted about it. The Electronic Frontier Foundation has guides on how to protect your data and security at the U.S. border, explains what rights you have. The Atlanta federal court overseeing the case is expected to rule on Tunik's motion to suppress later this year. A Justice Department spokesperson declined to comment when reached by TechCrunch. Okay. So when we initially covered the Tornado Cash case on this show, a lot of you are like, Nico, why is this important? Tornado Cash isn't even Bitcoin. And I told you guys, because depending on the outcome of that Tornado Cash case, it will set a precedent. It was no coincidence that when Coin Center sued and said, hey, you know, this case is unconstitutional, and they lost that case, it's no coincidence that within a month they arrested the Samurai Wallet developers because they set a precedent. So what they're doing right now is they're trying to set a precedent, and they're making the argument that, hey, if you enter a duress pin at the border to wipe your device, that is destruction of property that the U.S. government wanted to seize. And this is where things kind of get like a little bit tricky, right? Because like there are so many different ways where, and I recommend this, by the way, you shouldn't be traveling with your hardware wallets.
That's what I was going to say.
Right? But like, what if you have a seed phrase in one jurisdiction and you have the same seed phrase in another jurisdiction? Are you crossing the border with things? Also, seed phrases are incredibly easy to encrypt and to hide. And they're very small. And then you get into the argument because, okay, you could say that the United States, you know, this is a law-abiding country and everything is stable here. And, you know, you can make that argument. Okay, fair enough. But what if you are a refugee trying to escape a country that is economically unstable and it has a political crisis where there's no economic opportunity for the people? Let's say that country is in a war. One of the first things those countries do is impose capital controls, specifically so that people don't leave. So there's a human rights element to this discussion as well, right? But you kind of see where this is going. And make no mistake, they know exactly what they're doing. This was on purpose. And the purpose of this is to set a precedent. So this case is incredibly important. We're going to stay on top of it. We're going to see what the outcome is. Because again, once there's a ruling here, it's basically going to say, look, listen, if you enter a duress pin at the border, you're destroying property that we meant to seize. That's what they're going to say. So interesting, very interesting how this is all playing out, how this is all happening. Of course, none of this is legal advice. But you know, I think it's incredibly important to cover. Opti, what's your take on this?
Well, obviously, like off rip, you know, I don't know much about this case or like what this guy's about or, you know, any of the real details in this case. But I did do just like a quick Google search here, and I asked it, like, does federal destroying property rules relate to digital information you own? And it from AI Google, it says federal property destruction laws generally do not apply to personal digital information, as primary statutes like 18 USC 1361 protect government-owned assets, not privately owned data. So, you know, obviously it seems a little fishy. Not going to really conversate too much on it, more talk about like what Nico is implying the precedent here. And that's like what you were saying. My initial thought is like, yeah, that's why, you know, most everyone says like, do not travel with your hardware wallets for these reasons. There's obviously ways that you can, you know, back up your seed phrase and then reload it wherever you go travel. And that's kind of the beauty of Bitcoin, is really like you can keep your seed phrase in your brain. Now, obviously for the long term, probably not the best route to go. Also, if you are in like a high stressful situation, you might, you know, mess up or forget your seed phrase. But like there is a precedent being set on this, you know, duress password kind of sentiment here, like whether you are destroying something, et cetera, but also from like the Bitcoin perspective, there is ways to do this without actually traveling with your hardware wallet. The other thing that really kind of stuck in my head while you were talking, it was reminding me of the sovereign individual quotes that you always talk about, you know, like as we start to get further into the fourth turning, you know, governments start to clamp down and the pigs learn to fly and all that good stuff.
I'll say them specifically. So the authors have also predicted that with the rise of this new cyberspace and consequently cyber money, it will become harder for a nation state to collect taxes from its citizens. And when I say taxes there, I'm not talking about income tax. I'm talking about inflation tax. They compare the state to a farmer keeping cows in a field to be milked, but that, quote, soon the cows will have wings. They predict that the government to collect taxes from its citizens in this type of society, it would have to violate human rights. Even traditionally civil countries will have to resort and turn nasty.
Dude, see, that was exact.
When I talk about taxes, again, I'm talking about specifically inflation, because when you talk about income tax, it is the law, right? It's in whether you agree with it or you disagree with it, it's right there. I don't think it's a society we've collectively agreed on the inflation tax. I don't think the vast majority of society is even aware that money can function without inflation, right? So it goes on to say, lacking their custom scope to, I'm just going to say, inflate. Governments, even in traditionally civil countries, will turn nasty. As inflation becomes uncollectible, older and more arbitrary methods of extraction will resurface. The ultimate form of withholding tax, the de facto or even overt hostage taking, will be introduced by governments desperate to prevent wealth from escaping beyond their reach. Unlucky individuals will find themselves signaled out and held to ransom in an almost medieval fashion. Businesses that offer services that facilitate the realization of autonomy by individuals will be subject to infiltration, sabotage, and disruption. Arbitrary forfeiture of property, already commonplace in the United States, where it occurs 5,000 times a week, will become even more pervasive. Governments will violate human rights, censor the free flow of information, sabotage useful technologies, and worse. Ladies and gentlemen, censor the free flow of information, sabotage useful technologies, violate human rights. What of those three things have not occurred yet, right? And again, this is because we are living in a paradigm shift. This is what you guys have to understand. Like, when Elon bought X and freed the bird, it fundamentally changed the landscape of media. When he allowed everyone to have a blue check mark, do you remember what legacy media? They freaked out. Like, wait a second. So you're saying that like some random person could just sign up for a subscription and they have the same blue check mark as me? How dare they? I'm an official reporter. But like, this is why legacy media and the new media, which I would consider the mainstream at this point, this is why they're at odds with each other. Because like Opti and I, literally, there are creators right now that just started their own media operations from their house. And because of platforms like YouTube, Rumble, and X, they've built massive followings, and some of them get more views than legacy media. And here's the thing. It's a lot easier for you to co-opt the narrative if there's only a handful of channels on TV. But for you to co-opt the narrative of millions upon millions of people talking freely amongst each other, why do you think in the United Kingdom they're jailing people for mean tweets? Why do you think in the in the European Union, they're talking about, ending end-to-end encryption in chats? It's about control. They're saying it's about safety, but ultimately it's about control.
You got another vote? Did you see the Elon Musk Economist interview this weekend?
Oh, it's fantastic.
It's like literally like a perfect example of what we constantly talk about, where like the legacy media thinks they're still like the authority figure. And what was the main one that everyone saw was like, Elon, everyone hates you. And he's like, yeah, but you're a journalist. They hate you more. And it's just like, bro, we are living in such interesting times, to say the least.
If you get your information from legacy media versus you get your information from the new media, you fundamentally live in different realities. Full stop. I remember when the Iran conflict started, and just out of curiosity, I tuned into Fox News. And dude, they're just treating this like it was just like a run of the day, like, yes, we are now bombing, a foreign country. Like it was just like normal talk. It was crazy. It was absurd. And then, of course, on X, everyone's like, dude, like, what the hell? Like this, he broke his campaign promises, like, but there's like open dialogue and open conversation, like what everybody is thinking. And then I'll give you guys the best. They kind of co-opted this at this point, but the best example of this is like the Rotten Tomato reviews, where you have like the official critics and then you have like the audience, right? And then like they co-opted this. They put a stop.
I think they just got exposed for
They
were massaging the critic score, they're massaging the audience scores.
So like, and then like a great example of this is like some platforms just remove the dislike button so you can't see it, right? So like these are
I'm happy YouTube did that.
These are just great. These are just great examples of like what I mean, where it's like the elites want you to believe a certain narrative, a certain worldview. And they had that ability before, but now the internet, information technologies, has given people the ability to just choose what they want to consume. And here's the catch. What's coming up? It will also give them, it is giving them the ability of what money they want to use. And that's the crux of it. That's where we're at. That's where we're at in the movie. We're in the beginnings of that. I think we already passed the disintermediation of information in state. I think that's what that whole commotion was with the deplatforming, X, Elon acquiring X and all of that stuff. I think we've passed that. Like there's other governments that are still kind of pushing back and whatever, but like there's free flow of conversation to an extent. And we have the Alamo of Nostr in the back, right? That we can always go to. So I don't think you're going to put that genie back in the bottle. I think the next step, the next evolution is what happens when 10% of the population or 15% of the population starts saying, wait a second, I don't like dollars. I like Bitcoin. What happens when that happens? You're going to see the same reaction. You're going to see the same immune response that they had to the censorship of information. You're going to see that same immune response times 50 when that starts to happen. That's my prediction.
Well, even going even a step further, like as we are in this digital realm, obviously, you know, digital information is like it's kind of like a new wrinkle in the idea of how information is passed around. And as the old cliche, you know, knowledge is power, knowledge is wealth. You know, what Satoshi did is literally he turned digital information into actual money. And you're seeing that there's still a very hard time coming from the powers that be of how to actually handle this. And I think that's probably, you know, going full circle to the beginning, that's probably why we're seeing such pushback on the Clarity Act passing, and also further from like the Elizabeth Warren Democrat camp of like why they're so actively against Bitcoin is like they probably don't fully understand that idea, but like digital information is literally now money. And to them, it's just like such a alien technology and such an alien new concept that they're just instantly panicking and trying to close the door on it. And you can see that like we are entering, what's the dang, I'm blanking on, remember when we got in Bitcoin 2017, the BitConnect? Was it BitConnect? You know, we are no longer in the same world we once live in. Remember that clip,
no,
man?
I do remember that, but like
that's what, dude. We like it is Brave New World, but also like flipped on its head,
dude.
You know,
I saw the series Brave New World. Oh my god, you guys got to check it out. If you haven't read the book, but they made a series on it, and it's like so dystopian. But yeah, no, this is a pivotal shift in human history, ladies and gentlemen. You have to understand what is happening. I obviously recommend reading the book The Sovereign Individual because they lay out the thesis so well. And a lot of the things that they predicted, not all, but a lot of the things that they predicted have come true. And basically where I see society going, which is why I say Bitcoin or slavery, is ultimately we have there's a fork in the road. I don't think there's going to be an in-between. I don't think you can thread this needle. There's a fork in the road. I think you're going to have the continuation of fiat currencies in the form of CBDCs. And I think, which is what China is doing, right? Which is you have a totalitarian state that literally sees all your communications. You can't talk bad about them. And they need this because they need to coerce people into using fiat. And then there's the other option, which is Bitcoin, which is a world of freedom, prosperity, opportunity. And the last bit of information I'll leave for you guys on today's show is this. Why are we being forced to use the money that steals from you? Did you agree to that in the social contract?
I don't ever, you know, remember signing the social contract.
Did you agree to that in the social contract? Does society even know what I just said? It's a very simple concept. Right now, in most countries around the world, you are essentially forced via coercion to use money that has inflation baked in. I don't see the moral argument there. I don't see what argument you can use against that. I don't see what argument you could say, oh, but Nico, you know, this is a good reason for that. It's like, okay, but what if you're in Venezuela and you have to deal with like 50 to 60% monthly inflation? What do you do to survive? You have to adopt an alternative out of necessity. And I would say that the United States right now at this moment, with the wealth inequality that we have in this country, we're at this point. Full stop. We're at this point in history. We're at this critical junction right now where if you're a millennial or a Gen Zer, you literally cannot afford anything. The majority. You are poorer than your parents, even though the country is significantly wealthier. Why? Fiat, the money printer, It's not politics. It's not because Team Blue or Team Red is not in power. It's because they continue to debase the currency. And they have to at this point. So where does this end? Like, what is the natural outcome of this? I see it ending in one way. Just all roads lead to Bitcoin inevitably. You might live in a country where the inflation rate isn't big enough for you to realize what is happening. But that is a privilege. Most countries around the world, they don't have that privilege. They don't have that privilege. So Western countries that I would say have a relatively stable fiat currency where you're like, you know what, I could live with this. It's only 5% or 3%. They say it's 3%, but it's like 10%, whatever. Anyhow, before I wrap up today's show, I do want to give a shout out to our sponsor. Guys, go check out Ocean. Take control of your Bitcoin mining and make more money. The industry's lowest fees and most transparent payouts. Point your miners to mine.ocean.xyz : right? It's a colon. The two dots on top of each other. 334.
Yeah. It's cool.
Anyhow, if you guys enjoyed today's show, you know what to do. Smash that like button, consider subscribing. We'll see you tomorrow for a brand new episode of Simply Bitcoin Live. Peace out, everybody.
Today's episode was brought to you by BitcoinWell.com, a Bitcoin-only platform on a mission to enable financial independence.